Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And given that we've got the lowest budget and the lowest payroll in baseball, the question of whether or not we're actually going to save these A's as we near a decade into this playthrough is certainly an open question. But for near-term purposes, if we can guide this team from where we are right now, which is a 500 record and just out of the playoffs, to a third postseason appearance in 4 years at the end of this season, I would view that as a pretty good result towards saving the A's for a team that has perennially had the smallest budget in baseball throughout this payroll. Even though at $158 million we are as high as we have ever been. As we sit here on August 1st with about 2 months left in the season, we've made 4 key acquisitions over the past month. We're renting Juan Soto, who is off to an outstanding start with us, and we hope will provide our offense, which has been struggling, as it often does, with a nice boost. And we also made a trade to rent Brian Ramos for the rest of this season. Pitching-wise, we have picked up Ty Madden, who's 3-2 for us in 5 starts with 39 strikeouts in 28 2/3 innings. Yet somehow has a sickly 5.02 ERA. Certainly the 348 BABIP that he has allowed is not a great sign, but his Sierra of 211 is glittering, and he's already more than a win above replacement in 5 starts. So he has certainly helped, and we are hoping that the recent addition of Daniel Espino, who is yet to pitch for us out of the bullpen, will also help. Espino is a guy who we think could step in the rotation for us and give us some solid pitching if it turns out that we have some injuries or need to replace somebody. But Jackson Ferris, our number 1 starter, is our lone all-star this year, and he's been our best pitcher throughout the season. But Burns, Madden, DeCaro, and Miller have all been good to respectable this season. So unless there's injury issues, I think we're probably pretty set with this 5-man rotation for the rest of the season. Should be getting our center fielder Luis Lara back in the next week or so. Probably will put him on a quick rehab assignment. And then one of the better young prospects in our system, Levi Sterling, who suffered a torn back muscle right at the end of spring training, could be back in early September, and depending on how he pitches for us, he might be in the mix to be in the bullpen for us in the postseason, assuming that we do earn a spot into the playoffs. As I mentioned, we are half a game behind both Tampa Bay and Minnesota for the final 2 wildcard spots in the American League. So we do have some work to do over these last couple months of the season. At 500, our team has underperformed Pythagorean expectations a bit. We're coming off our best month of the season in July, and if I were a betting man, which actually I am from time to time, I think that when all is said and done, these A's will be in a wild card season when the postseason gets underway. Wild card series when the postseason gets underway. And unfortunately, we lost Game 1 of the month of August to Seattle. That completes a 3-game sweep for the Mariners on the road against our A's, which dropped us from 2 games over 500 to 1 game under, starting a 7-game homestand with 4 games against the last place Rangers. We've also got 4 games on the road against the Rangers, and then another 3 at home against the Rangers before the end of this month of August. Hopefully the opportunity to be playing one of the worst teams in our division on paper right now, and on the computer screen, the worst team in our division, 11 times this month will be positive for us, particularly because we did pull Ty Madden away from them, and hopefully having him to pitch at least a couple of those games will result in a couple more wins for Oakland over the Rangers. Would certainly expect and hope that this team will be above 500 by the time we get to September. Unfortunately, though, we've dropped the first 2 to Texas, so we've lost 5 in a row at this point to fall to 52 and 55. We did also get some information back that is not a surprise. You may remember that Jonathan Jackson, who we picked in the 19th round, was listed as impossible to sign and was looking for over $11 million, believing that that was incredibly high offer for someone who is clearly at best a major league reliever. We just decided to offer him $5 million and see if maybe we could get lucky. Pretty much expected that he would refuse the offer, but it's always interesting just to test these old hard and fast rules and old experiences, and anecdotally offering someone less than half of what they're looking for when they are listed as impossible to sign is still not a strategy to actually get that player into your organization. And as some of you probably noticed, I did miscount. I thought it was a 4-game series with Texas to start the month. It's actually a 3-game series with Texas and then 4 games against Tampa Bay. So we have now been swept in 2 consecutive series against division foes who were behind us in the standings at the time of those series. I'm fearful that Seattle may have gotten past us now, and I think we could conceivably be just about tied with Texas. We'll have to look at the standings there, but only 10 games against Texas this month. One slightly positive piece of news is that Levi Sterling looks like he's about 2 weeks ahead of schedule in terms of his recovery, so we could conceivably have him back before September call-ups if we really wanted to, but realistically think that September 1st, when we get to roster expansion, is probably still when we'll likely see him in the majors. Probably will give him a week or so in the minors just to get warmed up after not pitching for the entire season, and then when the rosters get larger, we'll bring him up and see what he can do this year in September. And we did finally stop that long losing streak with a 9-6 win over Tampa Bay yesterday, so that's positive. Luis Lara has started his rehab assignment. I think it is conceivable that we may move on from Jared Kelenic when Lara is ready to go. Kelenic has hit just a $171 for us at the major league level with a sickly 22 WRC plus. Brought him up so he could be a second captain for us alongside Justin LeBron, who has been playing primarily against left-handed pitching and isn't thrilled with that. But positively, in one small piece of positive news, Jason DeCaro, actually he's not anymore. Jason DeCaro had been a captain personality in previous years, and it looked like he had lost that personality, and it seemed like he had gotten it back. He actually did get it back because I'm not going crazy. When I checked in on this on August 1st, just over a week ago, but apparently it's something very volatile. I don't know if it has to do with his performance or not. He did pitch yesterday in that win. You would think that if anything, that would enhance his position within the organization, although it was not a particularly good performance, allowing 6 earned runs and 3 home runs. So maybe if he pitches better going forward, because it does look like he's gotten rocked in each of his last 2 starts, maybe that's why, and he had a brilliant start before that when we looked at him, and he was a captain personality again after pulling his record from 1-5 all the way up to 6-5. So the good news is that potentially DeCaro will at some point get that captain personality back to give us a second captain in the clubhouse. But right now I am leaning towards moving on from Kelenic when Lara is ready to come back, simply because Kelnic's just not hitting as much as I'd like to have a captain personality in the clubhouse to help us. When you have a left fielder who's hitting a .171 with an on-base percentage below 200 and a 22 WRC plus, who's a competent but not spectacular defensive player, unless that bat gets productive, it's pretty hard to justify having him on the roster, even if he's got the most wonderful personality in the world. And we did, as you notice, have another injury, or as you probably noticed, Chase Lee going to be out for about a week with elbow inflammation. He's put up a 4.57 ERA this year. He's taken back over as our closer midway through the season and hasn't been particularly effective this year with a WAR of almost a win below replacement. So we are going to actually throw him on the IL and go back to the minors to bring back a guy who was having a pretty good year for us that got caught up in the numbers game when we brought on Madden and Espino in relatively short order. And with that move to the injured list for Chase Lee, Henry Lalane back. He started 2 games for us in Las Vegas, 1-1 with a 4.61 ERA. But the lefty has been better than that at the major league level, at least in terms of his statistics this year. And will be good to get a third lefty in the pen for us, at least for the next couple of weeks. And then once Lee's healthy, we'll be once he's healthy, it's only likely to be a week from now, but it's going to be over 2 weeks till we can get him off the IL. So it will be near the end of August by the time we've got to make another decision on whether to send Lalane back down to the minors for the week before September call-ups, or whether there might be some other method for us to try. We are going to put Andrew Nardi back into the closer role. He has had a pretty rough year for us in Oakland with a 5 ERA, but has been pitching a bit better of late. And when we look at his ratings, he should be one of the better arms out of our bullpen. We'll see if maybe the move back into the closer role can kickstart his productivity somewhat. And we ended up splitting the 4-game series with the Rays. So I guess that's progress after losing the first 5 games of the month, but certainly a 2-6 record to start out the month of August, and 18 consecutive days that we're going to be playing, including an upcoming 10-game roads trip, is not the way we wanted to start the season. We've got this 10-game road trip entirely against divisional rivals, the Angels, 4 at Texas, and then 3 at Houston. As we sit here on August 9th, we are still 3rd in the division, but only half a game ahead of the Mariners and the Angels after they swept us in those series. And we've dipped to 2 games behind the Twins for that final wild card spot. The Twins, even though they shipped Juan Soto to us, are hanging tough with a .500 record and a second place standing in the AL Central. They've actually been playing better since they traded Soto away, which is a odd development. And we did decide to waive and DFA Mr. Kelenic. That'll allow us to get Lara back on the team, and we'll put him into center field in the leadoff spot against right-handed pitching. Jake Ortega will drop down to second in the batting order against right-handed pitching and move to left field. Ortega will still be our center fielder against left-handed pitching, but a couple of switch hitters at the top of the lineup, followed by Soto, Keith, Ramos, and Cabral. Sounds like a lineup that to me should be able to score some more runs than we usually have been this season. And with a 4-game below 500 record a week plus into August. It's getting very close to be time where we're going to need to start scoring more runs if this season is going to finish in the playoffs as we hope and expect that it will. And we've got some good news and some really bad news. The good news is that we're off to a 4-1 start on this road trip. We swept the Angels, and we've split the first 2 games of the 4-game series in Texas to get back to 1 game below 500 at 58 and 59. So that's clearly the good news. The really bad news is that Brian Ramos, who we brought over as a rental and traded away a package including one of the top young pitchers in our organization, admittedly someone who is going to miss most of next year due to injury and hasn't been developing as well as we would have hoped, but still paid a high price for him as a rental, and with a strained ACL that's going to keep him out for 2 months unless we make a relatively long run in the playoffs. The extent of Ramos' Oakland career is likely to be 50 at-bats, during which he was giving us exactly what we hoped for. He had 3 doubles, 2 homers, 8 ribbies, on-base percentage over 800, a 122 WRC+. He definitely helped lengthen our lineup. Unfortunately, he's not going to be in the lineup again this regular season unless he has a somewhat miraculous recovery from this strained ACL. And with the move of Ramos to the IL, part of me thought since Kelnick still had 2 days left before we had to make a decision on him, and he had not been claimed by anybody to bring him back onto the roster at the major league level, but he's been so unproductive that we went in a different route. Chase DeLauder, a left-handed bat like Kelnick, is now going to be back in the starting lineup after he's been more of a pinch hitter for the last few weeks. And we recalled the youngster Kevin Stubblefield from AAA. You may remember we sent him down there when I believe it was when we brought Ramos on board, although it may have actually been earlier than that. It may have been when we brought Soto on board, as I think about it. Regardless, he was incredibly productive in 98 AAA at-bats, 10 doubles, 5 homers, 12 ribbies, a 357 average, and a 152 WRC+. He's only going to be in the lineup at the major league level against left-handed pitching. Hopefully that'll put him in the best possible opportunity for success on the field. Probably not perfect in terms of his continued development, but at this point, at 58 and 59, the goal needs to be to put out the roster that we think gives us the best chance of winning as many games as possible. We have snuck, despite our losing record, back into the final wild card spot in the AL, but we're only half a game ahead of Minnesota, a game above Seattle, 2 above Texas, and 2.5 above Toronto. So it still is a battle of 7 or 8 teams for those final 2 spots in the playoffs in the American League this year. And hopefully we will be one of those last 2 teams standing about a month and a half from now when this season comes to an end. And unfortunately, with Ramos now out of the lineup, we lost the last 2 games against Texas and combined for only 3 runs in those 2 games. So the volatile playoff race continues, and we are in a 3-game tie now with the Rangers and the Twins. Interestingly, the 2 teams that we traded with for our biggest acquisitions before the trade deadline for the final wild card spot in the AL this year. And with just over a week left to go in August before we get to September roster expansion, we had clawed our way back to 500, took the series against Houston and against Colorado 2 out of 3, but losing the final game of that Colorado series has us dropped below 500 once again. Got 3 against Texas, which is going to be critical given how they have been lurking around us for the last couple of months. And then 3 at the Dodgers and a game in Arizona for our last 7 games before we get to September 1st and roster expansion. Taking a look at the standings, we are still holding on to the final wild card spot despite our losing record on the year, and we're a game and a half ahead of both the Rangers and the Orioles, 2 games ahead of the Blue Jays and the Twins, and 2.5 ahead of the Mariners in this intense battle for these last couple wild card spots in the American League in this 2032 season. And the A's finally seem to be playing, fortunately, some of our best baseball of the year. We've now won 4 series in a row, took 2 out of 3 against Texas, and then we swept the Dodgers at Chavez Ravine. Mentioned that we've got 1 game left this month, tomorrow against the Diamondbacks, before we get into the month of September. But we have moved to 3 games over 500 at 67 and 64. And we are now tied for the 2nd and 3rd wild card spots in the AL with the Orioles, and we're only half a game behind the Rays for the 1st wild card spot in the AL at this point. The Angels have lost 6 in a row, really come back down to earth after it seemed like they were somewhat secure compared to the rest of the wild card contenders in the American League. And 3.5 behind for Texas, 4.5 behind for Toronto. So it may not be the 8-team race that we've been anticipating, but at this team there are 4 teams separated by just 1 game for 3 wild card spots in the American League. So we're going to continue to need to play pretty good baseball over the next month to ensure that we guide this team into the playoffs and get the winning record that ownership is expecting from us this year at a minimum. And unfortunately, we did lose the final game of the month to the Diamondbacks. Jake Ortega was the American League Rookie of the Month, .359 average, 4 homers and 17 ribbies. Ortega has been incredibly productive in this rookie year for him. .307 on the year, 34 doubles, 13 homers, 10 stolen bases, and a .133 WRC plus, 3.9 WAR on the season for the college player we picked out of Oregon State, 3rd overall back in 2029. Signed him to a long-term extension about a year ago when he had no substantive major league experience, but seems like we may have gotten lucky with this one, and still think that he can improve a bit from the lofty levels that he's already producing at as a major league player. And checking back in, things are even tighter now with us having lost and the Orioles having lost. The Rays lost again, and then the Angels won. So the Angels are back into that 1st wild card position, but 4 teams separated by just half a game as September begins, fighting for the final 3 wild card spots in the American League. Taking a look at our team statistics, we've had a very productive offensive month in August, moved up to 4th in the American League in runs scored. We're 5th in the American League in runs allowed, so somewhat shockingly, given the fact that we still don't hit many home runs, don't get on base all that often, and have a pretty mediocre slugging percentage. But we get lucky and we score a lot of runs, and at 67 and 65, we're 6 games below Pythagorean expectations, so it tells me we may have still gotten a little bit unlucky this year. Certainly that 15 and 19 record in 1-run games is symptomatic of that to a degree, and that is also a low priority goal for ownership for us this year, to improve that record in 1-run games, given that we are 4 below 500 in 1-run games with just 30 games to go this season. I think it's unlikely that we're going to make the type of progress that Mr. Fisher wants to see there, but we have strung together 2 consecutive winning months, and my hunch is if we have another winning month here in September, we will be playing baseball in October in the postseason. And before we decide exactly who's going to be coming up and joining us in the majors and helping in this playoff push, we'll check in on, at this point, the 3 players that we picked up in trade, since we know that Mr. Ramos is injured for the year. Ty Madden, 5-3 record and 8 starts, has the ERA down to 4.88. 277 Sierra, kind of weird. His ERA plus is fairly significantly below average, but his FIP minus is even more significantly above average, so that's a odd paradox there. Still has put up a 1.3 WAR for us in 10 starts, so he has been reasonably productive for us. Daniel Espino has been okay with a 4.34 ERA over 18 2/3 innings. Has allowed 23 hits, including 3 homers. Fortunately, he hasn't walked a ton of batters, but he's barely been above replacement level. And then, most importantly, what has Mr. Soto done for us since we brought him on board to jumpstart our offense? And he has slowed down a bit. The batting average down to 288, and only 6 doubles and 4 home runs in 153 at-bats. He's put up a 130 WRC plus. He has walked 31 times, so he's still getting on base over 40% of the time. But would hope over the final 30 games that he's with us that his WRC plus and his WAR are more significantly positive than they have been thus far, as we try to hopefully put the final touches on a playoff season here in Oakland. And we have brought up 2 pitchers and 2 position players to bolster our roster for this final month of the season as we try to guide Oakland back into the playoffs. The pitchers I don't think should be any surprise. Henry Lillane, who we sent back down about a week ago when Chase Lee was ready to come off the IL, back in a bullpen role for us as a lefty for the rest of the year. And then Levi Sterling, who missed basically the entire year with an injury, got 3 starts for us on his rehab assignment in AAA. Did have a 2-0 record, but he did also have a 6.59 ERA. Still kind of working his way into form, but we are going to give the 25-year-old a second consecutive September call-up. Still think he could be a pretty important arm for our bullpen going forward, who can also start for us in a pinch. Concerned about the walks, concerned about the home runs that he might give up, and certainly with 5 home runs allowed and 9 walks in those 13 2/3 rehab innings, those seem to be the correct things for us to be concerned about as far as his potential contributions to this team over the long term. And position player-wise, one player that probably will be expected to be seen up here at the major league level, and then one that will be a surprise simply because it's not someone we've ever really talked about. The expected addition is Hideki Arakawa, who's been down in AAA. You can see he's competent at 3 infield positions, and we can play him in right field if we need. Productive season for him in AAA. He'll give us a little bit more defensive versatility here between Arakawa and the recently acquired Saltaban to mix and match and pinch hit for guys without necessarily sacrificing a ton of infield defense over the next month. The second guy that we're bringing up is a guy that we hope may make an impact as a pinch hitter. And Luis Taveras will be making his major league debut. He's a guy that we picked up in a trade with the Angels over 5 years ago. It was a trade deadline trade. Go back to the history on it. And Jorge Ruiz, the center fielder, was the, I believe, primary target of us in that trade. He ended up making his major league debut with us later that year when we needed a little bit of defensive help in center field, but we did also get Taveras in that trade. We traded away the veteran pitcher Josh Spores, as well as a couple of guys who have retired since then, and left fielder Telma Beauvalet. And we also got a little bit of money in return. But Taveras, although he's never really been a top prospect, is a guy who has kind of come out of nowhere to become a pretty useful player for us. You can see that when we picked him up in the summer of 2027, he's improved his contact. Oh, we don't want to be looking at these OSA reports for whatever reason. But now we have to go back a lot further, unfortunately, to see what he was. But when we picked him up, we thought he could develop into a useful player with potentially 55 contact, 60 power, and a 50 eye. And at this point, still see the same kind of potential for him. And actually, with the big investment that we've had in our minor league system and the good coaching that we have, he's a player that has slowly progressed and basically completely developed as much as we could have hoped. Taking a look at what he's done this year, started the year in Double-A, where he hit .320 with a ridiculous 36 homers and 84 ribbies and 331 at-bats. Promoted him to Triple-A, where he's had 105 at-bats and still been very productive. 7 doubles, a triple, 6 homers, 20 ribbies, 343 average. His OPS has been over 1,000 at both levels, 145 WRC plus at Triple-A. Solid influence in the clubhouse with the high loyalty and work ethic. Not a particularly good defensive outfielder, but as a right-handed hitter, we think he could be a useful pinch hitter for us over these last 30 games of the season. And hopefully at some point along the line, we'll be in a situation where Mr. Taveras can pinch hit perhaps for one of our less strong hitting infielders and ultimately get filled in for as a defensive substitute after coming through with a big hit by an Arakawa or a Saltibon. And if that scenario plays out a few times over the next few weeks, hopefully we'll be in a position where come the beginning of October, we are preparing for the postseason. And taking a look at our proposed schedule and our actual schedule, as it were, for the month of September. Going to have a lot of games against our divisional rivals. Finish off this homestand with a game in Arizona, followed by 4 on the road at Houston. Then we travel out east to face the Yankees and the Red Sox. Couple games at home against Arizona. We don't travel out east. We're back home, and the Yankees and the Red Sox traveling west to visit us in Oakland, and then a couple games at home against Arizona before we finish with the teams in our division, several of which we are competing with for these final wild card spots. We're going to have 4 at Seattle, followed by 3 at Texas, followed by 3 at the Angels, and then we're going to finish up the season with a homestand, 3 against Houston, and the final 4 against the Angels as we push into October. The Angels are half a game ahead of us, the Rangers 3 behind us, and the Mariners 4.5 behind us. And all 4 of these teams in 2nd through 4th in the American League West are separated by just 5 games, competing for those 3 wild card spots in the AL. And as I mentioned earlier, I felt like if we can put a winning record together in this month of September, that we will be in the playoffs when all is said and done. And now it is time to see whether or not the rubber will meet the road on that prediction. And we ended up going 3-2 over the first 5 games of the month. Took the game at Arizona, and then we split 4 games in Houston. Interestingly, as you can see, although we got a 1-run win against Arizona, both of the losses against Houston were 1-run losses. Interestingly, for a team that historically hasn't scored too many runs and has had good pitching, we seem to be winning the slugfests and losing a lot of the pitching duels right now, which is a little odd for a team that has our profile. And we did exactly what we needed to do in our homestand. We took 2 out of 3 against the first place Yankees, and then we won 3 in a row, all by 1 run. Maybe we will ultimately have a decent record in 1-run games when all is said and done against the last place Red Sox. If you look carefully, you will see we did lose a 1-run game to the Yankees right before the 3 straight 1-run wins against Boston. So as we sit here on September 13th, record up to 75 and 68, still 6 below expectations, but we're off to a real nice start in September, still 4th in the league in runs scored. We've moved back up to 4th in the league in runs allowed, still 3 games below 500 in those 1-run games. Taking a look at the standings, we are now clearly in second place in the AL West. We are in the second wild card spot, a game behind Tampa, only half a game ahead of Baltimore. But fortunately, Baltimore is 3.5 ahead of the Angels at this point for that final wild card spot. So we have a 4-game lead at least on remaining in the playoffs at this point. Taking a look at the league leaders, as has been the case for most of this year, don't see anybody from our Oakland A's near the top of the leaderboards in the American League. And unfortunately, the last week has been a little less successful. Win one, lose one, win one, lose one, win one, lose one. So obviously a 500 week for us, as we've lost 2 out of the first 3 against Seattle on this final road trip of the year. We've got Texas and the Angels before we come back home over the next week. As we sit here with about 2 weeks left in the season, 78 and 71 record, still second place in the AL West, and we are now a game and a half up on the Orioles for the final wild card spot. 4 games away from needing to worry about our playoff spot. Still a game behind the Rays for the second wild card, or the first wild card spot in the American League. And given that the Yankees with a 13-game lead have a magic number of 1, the Royals with a monster season are 30 games up and have already clinched, and the Astros magic number is down to 1. Those 3 teams that have been running away with the divisions are all clinched or going to clinch them in the coming day or 2. So it's really the battle for the wild card spots, and I think the best thing that we can probably hope for is to put ourselves in a position where we get past Tampa Bay into that 4th wild card spot, because that will guarantee that we will have home field advantage for the wild card series, and it'll also ensure that we'll be playing a Tampa Bay or a Baltimore team, most likely, that would finish in 5th, rather than having to face one of the 3 division winners, all of whom could end up with 100-plus wins. I mentioned earlier that there was nobody on the leaderboard for us, and over the past week, Jake Ortega has caught fire. The rookie's batting average is up to .321 right now. Interestingly, Galterio Mancina, who was a international free agent in 2025 that we were very interested in back then and decided to go in a different direction, is having a monster year for the Royals in his first full season in the majors. Although I do think that I forget the rules. I think he may not qualify as a rookie anymore, because I believe at least back in the old days it used to be 150 at-bats or 45 games, but maybe I'm making that up. If not, Mancina is going to be a great competitor for us with Ortega for Rookie of the Year. But both Mancina and now Ortega, whose batting average is up to 321, have a chance of being that very rare rookie winning a batting title. I can think of Tony Oliva and Ichiro. I can't say for sure whether or not there's been one more recently. It's not inconceivable that I'm not thinking of someone who's happened more recently, because as a old school guy, I tend to live a little more in the history than in the present at times. But Mancina and Ortega, a couple of youngsters competing for a batting crown this year. And honestly, Jorge Toledo, who's only 26 years old, and interestingly, another international free agent signing from that first class in 2025, having a pretty productive offensive season for the Orioles. And it looks like the qualifications for a rookie are 130 at-bats or 50 innings pitched. I think I might have been confusing the games played that I mentioned with innings pitched. But regardless, Mancina, who would clearly be with a plus 300 average, 40 homers and 128 ribbies, a guy that even Jake Ortega would have a tough time competing with in the Rookie of the Year votings despite his great season. Mancina's not going to qualify as a rookie, so Ortega is the guy who's got a chance at winning a batting title as a rookie this year, and also perhaps winning Rookie of the Year for us. And we'll see how he performs over these last couple of weeks of the season. We haven't clinched anything yet. Got 3 against Texas and 3 against the Angels before the final 7 games at home to finish off this season. And as we head into the final 2 weeks of the season, check in on our owner goals. Look like we're in pretty good shape to have a winning record this year. We have modestly improved home runs, moving from last in the league to 13th. Our draft record, not particularly impressive, although we do at least have 3 guys who have contributed almost 7 WAR on the squad this season. Ortega, clearly the key player in that equation. Want that better record in extra inning games this year, and unfortunately that's high importance, and we're not going to do too well there. And also wants us to win a second championship, which we've got to get to the playoffs to do. Right now we are on pace to do that. The goal is to close the deal over these next 2 weeks. And we've split our first 2 games against Texas. So as we sit here now with just 11 games left to play in this season, our magic number for a playoff spot is down to 9. We're 2.5 up on the Orioles for the final wild card spot, but only 3 games away from potentially being out of the playoffs at this point, as the Angels have won 3 in a row. Ortega still certainly in the mix for a batting title. He's going to need a few big games. Unfortunately, our second most important offensive player at this point, Colt Keith, we're going to officially say that Mr. Soto is more important than Keith, but Keith banged up day-to-day with back spasms. Given that he's fragile, we're going to be careful, and we're going to bench him for these next 3 days. Although the batting average is dipped to 231 this year, and the WRC is dipped to 109. Still looks like he's going to be a guy who's going to finish the season with over 30 homers and well over 100 ribbies. So still a pretty important player for us, but we are going to be cautious with him since we're not quite in a must-win situation. Checking in on Mr. Soto, and he has been more productive here in the month of September. 5 home runs for the month after having just 4 in his first 40-some-odd games with the team. And he's pushed his WRC plus up to 141. The batting average about where it was when we last checked in, but the on-base percentage has improved as well. So hopefully, especially these next 3 days, Soto will pick up the slack with Keith out of the lineup, and will test that depth that we tried to bring up at the beginning of September over these next several days. And it was another just okay week for our A's. We lost 2 out of 3 in Texas before winning 2 out of 3 in Anaheim against the Angels. So another 500 week for us. The good news is that we are at home for the final 7 games of the season against Houston and the Angels at 81-74, 1 win away from clinching the winning record. Still in second in the division, and we are 3 games up on the Angels and the Orioles now for the final wild card spot in the American League. We're a game and a half behind the Rays for hopefully getting the home field advantage in the 4-5 matchup as far as the seeds in the AL. Certainly would prefer, if it ends up being us against the Rays, that we've got the home field advantage, but we've got some work to do to catch them with just 7 games left on our schedule, being a game and a half behind. But our magic number to clinch the playoffs is down to 5. So the goal is to hopefully get that done as soon as possible. And although Houston is by far the best team in the division this year, if we can take 2 out of 3 against them at home, that'll go a long way towards hopefully getting us into a position where we can be heading into the month of October feeling like we are secure in a potential playoff spot. And if you hadn't noticed, Ortega tied with Toledo with a .318 batting average. They're 5 points behind Mancina, so going to need a big final week of the season from Jake Ortega if he's going to win a batting title as a rookie. And things went reasonably well against the first place Astros. We took 2 out of 3 against them. Of course, we did suffer another 1-run loss, as we often tend to do. So with 4 games left in the season, we've certainly clinched a winning record for the year at 83-75. Magic number for the playoffs for us is down to just 1, as we've got a 3-game lead on the Orioles and a 4-game lead on the Angels for that second wild card spot. We're still a game and a half behind the Rays, so it's going to be tough for us to catch them. In all probability, it's going to be Oakland and Tampa Bay facing off in that wild card series. And in all probability right now, we are going to be the team on the road for that series, which, as you might expect me to say, is not optimal. And you can see that although we won 2 out of 3 games against Houston, Ortega was not a particularly effective part of it, as his batting average has dipped a bit, and he's no longer in the top 3 in the American League, with Mancina at .326 and just 4 games left. Going to need a lot of 3 and 4 hit games from Mr. Ortega to have any chance of getting back into the batting race. And we have won the first game of the series against the Angels to clinch a wild card spot, a 1-0 victory. Only 2 hits for Oakland and 1 hit for the Angels, so some great pitching outings. Mason Miller with allowing just 1 hit over 8 innings, no walk, struck out 5. He's going to finish the year 12-6 with a 3.57 ERA, so one of the better seasons in Miller's successful run here in Oakland for us, and he has officially pitched us into the playoffs for the 3rd time in 4 seasons. You can see Soto with a solo home run in the bottom of the 1st accounted for essentially all of our offense. And with that win on an off day for the Rays, they no longer have a game, or we no longer have a game in hand on them. We are a game behind them with 3 games to go, but we are 3 games ahead of Baltimore. So one more win guarantees that we avoid the 3-6 matchup and most likely the Astros in the first round of the playoffs. Realistically, we're probably going to need to sweep the last 3 games of this 4-game series to have any chance of getting past the Rays to host the wild card series between us and Tampa Bay. And we did get another win against the Angels in Game 2 of the series. So now with a 4-game lead over Baltimore, we are locked into the 4-5 wild card series. We're locked into playing Tampa Bay. Unfortunately, Tampa Bay also won again. So the chances of us sneaking past them to be able to be the host of that wild card series are rapidly decreasing, despite the fact that we are 7-3 over our last 10. But we have beaten the Angels once again, and the Rays finally just lost. So we are in a flat-footed tie with Tampa as we sit here with 1 game to go. Ortega back to 3rd in the batting race, but 11 points behind Mancina. He is certainly not going to catch him. But we do have a chance of catching the Rays when we take a look at the team-by-team records. Our Oakland A's are 2-5 against Tampa, unfortunately. So the only scenario that gets us the home field advantage for the wild card series is us winning and them losing here on this final day of the season. And we've got our number 2 starter, Chase Burns, lined up to go. We pitched our ace, Jackson Ferris, yesterday, since we are still fighting to try to get by Tampa. Given that I do like Ty Madden a lot, and on paper you could argue that, at least according to the star ratings, he's the best pitcher on our pitching staff. He'll be ready to go in Game 1 of the playoff series. He's 7-5 with a 3.76 ERA for us. Has put up a 2.0 WAR for us over 16 games. So he has kind of delivered pretty much exactly what we would have hoped from him since he's been on board for us. Helped pitch this team into the playoffs, and we'll feel pretty good with him starting off a series against Tampa Bay for us. The hope is that maybe Burns pitches us to victory and we sweep the Angels in this final series of the season. And if we can combine that with a loss by the Rays, even though we'll be starting the series off with our number 3 starter, we won't have to be traveling across the country from Oakland to Tampa. And unfortunately, our desperate push over the final days of the season to pass by Tampa ended up failing. They won, and we lost against the Angels. We'll be starting our series against them tomorrow. So we're going to have to scramble a bit with our rotation, but we thought it was important to try to get the home field advantage for that best out of 3 series. We'll find out how that series goes in our next episode, but when all was said and done, for the 3rd time in 4 years, our A's are back in the playoffs. Felt like we needed a winning record in September to get there, and we certainly did that with a 17-10 record, 2-1 here in October. So over the second half of the season, we have been a team that's been well over 500 every month. Our 86-76 record underperformed Pythagorean expectations by 8 games. Certainly the 20-26 record in 1-run games, which Mr. Fisher is not going to be happy about, is a significant part of that. But we ended up with a pretty well-balanced team. 4th in the American League in runs scored. Ended up moving up to 11th in home runs. 3rd in walks, thanks in part to the addition of Soto. And we also ended up 3rd in the American League in runs allowed, 6th in starter ERA, just below 4, best bullpen ERA in the American League, and respectable, albeit not great, defense. So the team is back in the playoffs. The fact that we tried to some degree go all in on this season, given that we know that there's going to be a lot of turnover this upcoming off season, has at least paid off with a playoff appearance. Now the hope is to have that playoff appearance be longer than 2 or 3 games in a wild card series. We obviously just checked in on Mr. Madden very recently. Daniel Espino, the other addition, ended up with a 3.38 ERA for us over 24 innings pitched. So he was certainly respectable for us. And then Juan Soto, who is en fuego right now, ended up hitting 291 with 15 homers and 47 ribbies and 251 at-bats with the A's. Got his WRC plus all the way up to 155 and put up a 2 WAR for us over his half season in Oakland. So he has certainly been as promised and as expected in terms of his offensive production, and hopefully he'll have some big hits for us in the playoffs. You can see finishing with 15 home runs. Obviously, he has been incredibly productive over the last 30 games of this season. And we can see that in Soto's batting splits, too, with 8 homers and 22 ribbies in August, followed by 3 home runs and 5 ribbies with 6 hits in just 10 at-bats in the month of October. Hopefully, he will continue to be Mr. October over hopefully 4 more playoff series. And as we start preparing for the playoffs, everyone who's on our active roster is healthy at this point, so that should, I guess, make the decision-making a little harder technically, but still put us in a better position than potentially be having to worry about someone being banged up as the playoffs get underway. Brian Ramos still a week or 2 away from recovery from that strained ACL. So we're probably going to need to get to an American League Championship Series before he could potentially be in the mix to rejoin our roster. But if we can get wins in the ALCS and a subsequent ALDS, certainly the ability to potentially add Brian Ramos in for the League Championship Series would be a nice bonus for this roster. And if we make it that far, it's been a pretty successful season for us. And taking a look at our owner goals, obviously we had the winning record we needed. The improvement in home runs looks like it was acceptable to Mr. Fisher. Our draft record and our fan interest, albeit fan interest is not a goal due till 2035. We are decidedly in meh to below average territory. We've talked about our record in extra inning games. That's a high priority goal for this year that we are going to strike out on. And we will find out next time around whether we're able to build a second championship team here in Oakland in 2032. And until that next episode, when we find out what, if anything, these A's can achieve in the playoffs this year, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.